on, but I
Is
can
it on?
I
play
think
with
you have
the
to kind of
volume.
go right into it.
Really? Maybe I should do that. Okay, can you hear me okay if I speak like that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you for that. And anybody who knows me recently would laugh at that sewing bit because in 2007, as a treat for myself when I went on sabbatical, I bought myself a brand new, very nice sewing machine because my last sewing machine I got instead of an engagement ring. And I've been to Portsmouth Fabric Company 4 times now to get training on that sewing machine because every time I go I never use it again, and so it's still sitting there with all this beautiful fabric, and nothing's happened to it, but it's hopeful, and that's what I love. Okay, so I just told Kat that I want this chart because I have this really interesting concept about unintended consequences and how they come about when we look at something like this. And I have a very good friend who's coming to talk to my class on Wednesday who wrote a book called 3 Squares, The Invention of the American Meal. And she actually helped me to really put into a construct how we actually got here and what are the unintended consequences. And I think when we start looking at that, the solutions are going to all of a sudden show up. Okay, so my topic was to really introduce this whole concept of our raising the next generation or growing healthy kids by talking about some of the risk factors. And so I'm going to talk about what we do at the university, sort of how I got there, and some ideas of what I think we need to be doing that will lead into the next topic. So I'm on the faculty of nutrition at the University of New Hampshire, and I see some faces in the audience that I've either taught as nutrition majors or nursing majors, and it's nice to see them. And I've been working on raising healthy kids. I raised my own and others, and I teach a few related classes. I teach a class called Nutrition 400, Nutrition, Health, and Wellbeing, which is very large. We do about 1,000 students a year through that class. I teach a course called Nutrition 405, Food and Society, where we look at the cultural aspects of food and sort of how we got here. And then I teach a class on food science, which is sort of in this realm. And I realized I didn't put this down on my notes, but the one thing that I don't publish any books that you probably would want to read, or probably don't write much of anything that you'd really want to read. But I do the science editing for Cook's Illustrated, so some of you may read Cook's Illustrated. So that's going to be my only claim to fame here on anything that might be of particular interest to many of you that are interested in food. So over the past 30 years, I've observed many changes in our food system, as Kath put up here, but the concerns remain the same, like what constitutes a healthy diet and what will reinforce or enhance our genetic potential and our lifestyle choices. Over the years, the environment has changed, and I won't go into much more of this than Kath has up here. You know, as somebody who has been really watching this and working in it, I really have to hit myself and think, what have we been doing? You know, like we saw margarine come in as being healthy and out not healthy. Butter is out. You know, cholesterol is out. The latest one is saturated fat. It's not so bad. And you know, we see lots of interesting observations on changes. Coconut oil. I grew up thinking coconut oil was the worst thing going, and now we see coconut oil is back on. It's okay. When I first came to UNH, I was in the College of Health and Human Services, and part of what was soon to close, the Department of Home Economics. As was true across the country, home economics departments became human science or human ecology, but as with primary and secondary schools, home economics as a concept all but disappeared in the 70s. Again, goes along with this timeline. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So I want to tell you about what we're working on and why. So we know that we have about 11 million young adults aged 18 to 24 are enrolled in colleges and universities in the United States and living away from home for the very first time. Understanding this cohort is the focus of what we're doing on the healthy campuses, and in fact this is something that's going on nationwide. Understanding this cohort, our primary goal is looking at ways to improve their health as they emerge into what we call emerging adults. It's estimated, and there are many reasons why we look at this, we know that there are about 300,000 deaths and about $117 billion in healthcare costs each year that are attributed to obesity, and the emerging adult is no exception. They are not exempted from this. At UNH, we're focusing on this age group because, well, that's who we deal with. But in fact, there is a more clear rationale for doing so. Since young people do not perceive themselves as at risk, and this is not, this is both for chronic disease, but also many other things that they don't think they're at risk for. That transition from an adolescent into adulthood has been shown to be a time of increased risk developing. We also see that this is also a time for developing poor eating habits, and we're seeing a rise in obesity. And in fact, we're seeing the heaviest students that ever arriving in our college campuses. It's important in that cardiovascular disease is the second leading cause of death among persons 25 to 44, so that next stage after they leave college, this is cardiovascular disease is a risk. And in the 18 to 29, we're seeing an increase in the incidence of diabetes. Little is known about the relationship between weight status, dietary choices, and physical activity and biomarkers of chronic risk in this population, but we know that this is the adult population that's going in and will eventually be the ones that we're concerned about. We've seen national survey data that shows that that this population, 30% are overweight or obese, that 43% of the respondents between 18 and 24 have insufficient physical activity, and over 78% do not meet the 5 fruits and vegetable servings. I mean, and we don't even call 5 any longer, we want 9, so that's even more than that now. And I can say for sure, because we study this, very little whole grain. More significantly, metabolic syndrome is a cluster of symptoms that are associated with obesity, and it strongly predicts the future development of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. Abnormalities characteristic of metabolic syndrome include abdominal obesity, increased blood pressure, altered glucose metabolism, and altered blood lipid profiles. And you might say, well, these people are too young to show any of that, and that's in fact not true. At UNH and in 16 universities across the nation, we're studying these in a cross-sectional study. We're looking at these students, 18 to 22, for markers of metabolic syndrome, and we're finding them. We have what we call at UNH called the College Health and Nutrition Survey, and we survey somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 students a year and collect that information and are watching that over the years to see changes. What they do is they keep a 3-day diet record, and then remarkably, and every time we do this, I just thank all the people that work with me. We actually put them through a health risk screening, which includes we measure their blood cholesterol, their blood glucose, their blood pressure, and also do measurements of height, weight, and circumferences. We also have them do fitness testing, and this has become very important. We have them do a Rockport 1-mile test. They also do strength and flexibility measurements. And all of this has given us a wealth of information on ways of looking at what is the health of our emerging adult population. We found that at least 20 to 25% of them have one or more markers of metabolic syndrome. The things that we're finding are altered lipid profiles, altered glucose, which shows risk for diabetes. And one of the things that we've seen is those that are unable to perform well in the Rockport fitness test are at the ones that have the highest risk for developing diabetes and heart disease, because their biomarkers are actually showing us that. With this study, as well as nationwide, we're looking at this population again with the idea that while they're not aware of their risk, we're seeing those predictors that are going to show what happens in the future, and then we're looking at ways that we can alter their profile and help them understand, which is really interesting because they are an age that, because they don't believe they're at risk, they don't know their numbers. So we actually next year are going to start across New Hampshire an effort, at least this is our plan with the American Heart Association, to say know your numbers, and have them understand what blood pressure is, and not just for students but across this emerging population. But aside from this China study, we're also concerned about the lack of understanding of how to select a healthful diet. So we're watching them in this cohort, this cross-sectional study, but we're really looking at what is the lack of understanding of how to select a healthful diet and the lack of cooking skills. I teach a course called food science where I teach a lab in a kitchen. That's my science lab, and amazed at the lack of confidence. I'd say not so much that they can't, but they don't feel like they can do things in the kitchen. We do see a resurgence of interest in areas around food, and this has been something, again, I've been in this field for a long time, and we're starting to see a really positive interest in food system, in food security, in food sovereignty, and in cooking. We have a new major at UNH called Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems, which is extremely popular, and we also have created about 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, a dual major in eco-gastronomy. So this is a major where any major, they can be French, they can be nutrition, they could be political science, they can actually have a dual major in eco-gastronomy. This has been very, very popular, not only because they get to spend a semester in Italy, where they study local agriculture, systems, olive oils, cheese, and bread, or France, where they study viticulture, enology, and cheese. They also learn about the importance of food as more than just a delivery system of nutrients, but a deeply embedded part of their social and philosophical being, as well as the issues of sustainability, food sovereignty, and food justice. When we offer cooking classes, just as Tracy and Kathy do, they fill up immediately, and we're considering a graduation cooking class for seniors, but they would really benefit with something even before that, and we're going to hear from people that are doing things like that. So this brings me back to home economics. Home economics, or what was known as a domestic education, was a fixture in secondary schools through the 60s and early 70s, up until that point, at least for girls. And the underlying concept behind home economics, and there's lots of you in the audience that don't know this, some of you do. The underlying premise was, the concept was that the future homemakers should be educated in the care and feeding of their family. What a novel concept. But then we see that instead craft took over. And there were many reasons for that. This now seems like a quaint to some, but in the midst of pediatric obesity epidemic and concerns about poor diet quality of adolescents in the U.S., instruction on the basic food preparation and meal planning skills needs to be part of the long-term solution. I'm sure that that's the truth. Recent reports have really underscored the urgency of the situation, and that is that you sometimes see coexisting in the same family and sometimes in the same person, food insecurity and obesity. I mean, this has become a dual paradox. And this paradox arises not only from a lack of nutrition and affordable alternatives to fast food, but a lack of knowledge about how to prepare nutritious foods at home and within a budget, which again brings us back to home economics. But at the other extreme, we're also seeing high-end kitchen appliances that now have these smart options where with a push of a button, it'll figure out how to cook your chicken nuggets right on target. And in fact, those are, for sale. So just what is the perfect diet, or what is the diet for optimal health? And we all like to know, and I'm not going to give you that answer because I don't know either. But what we do know, and there's broad consensus exists regarding the benefits of home-prepared meals. So we don't know what's perfect, but we do know that home-prepared meals are associated with those health benefits. And research suggests that frequent consumption of meals outside the home, restaurant food, takeout food, not the Blue Moon, but other places, and prepared snacks lower diet quality and promote weight gain. For adolescents, these prepared meals and food away accounts for somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of all of the calories are consumed. And I've actually seen the numbers higher than that. So we can't rely solely on the home at this point, however, because more than ever before, parents don't know how to cook. And so we're seeing that, and why? Because they didn't learn from their moms, because their moms were like in the 50s here, where all of a sudden we learned that, we don't have time, and let Swanson take over. And so the work schedules, extracurricular preclude children being involved in shopping and preparation, and again, they don't know what a home-cooked meal really tastes like. So it's time to reinvent a way to do this, not necessarily bringing back home economics, which is sort of that gender-specific stereotype, but have boys and girls that are taught principles that they need to feed themselves, their families within the current food environment, actually learn some of the good, the good modern conveniences, but learn how to avoid the pitfalls. And the one thing we really need to dispel is what is aggressively promoted, and that is that it takes too much time or too much skill, or that it doesn't taste good if you cook it at home. And in fact, we're fighting an upward battle by doing that, because there is so much advertisement that would suggest just the opposite. And even if I know when I talk to my friends, nobody has time to cook. I don't know what they're talking about. Of course we do. You just have to figure out, and you have, having some confidence in the kitchen is really an important thing. I have lots of ideas on how this would work, and understand the enormous challenges and responsibilities placed in school curriculum, but when you really think about it, we teach about tobacco, we teach about alcohol, we teach about drugs, we teach about STDs. We should really teach something about the fundamentals of human activity like eating, and in fact that has actually, I know in my own school system, I'm in Durham, and my own school system, they're not replacing the life skills teacher who used to teach cooking. And granted, I'm not sure that my kids learned a lot they learned how to do some really weird things in those classes. But they got time to be in the kitchen and actually thought of it as something that was important. So by identifying risks and seeking ways to improve the education and meal planning and preparation, hopefully we can reverse the prognosis that currently exists that our children will be less healthy generation than the ones before. And we really have to do something about that. So I think our next speakers are really going to address that. I can't wait to hear about Chop Chop Magazine, because that's where you're going, the teaching skills for young children is so critically important, where they see that this is something that they can do and will do, and then helping their families include that also. I think Kathy was talking a little bit about Let's Move and these other great opportunities for engagement and changing the food scene for the younger population. And I'm hoping that, and of course culture is, understanding the meaning, the deeper meaning of food is well, for me anyway, I'm preaching to the choir here, but that is so incredibly important to us as human beings. So I think that all of these things, I'm looking forward to hearing the speakers coming after, and I'm hoping that, as we see these changes, and it's only been 5 years, so that I'm hoping that soon we're going to start to see when I'm doing these measurements, I'm going to say, what happened? All these kids are so healthy. The BMIs are down, the blood glucose is normal, and we're really doing well. And we can, and I know we can. And we'll continue to work at that end, but I really do believe that we all have to work on this together. We don't have, if anybody had the answers, that would be totally great, but we don't. But I think it's all going to be working together, and I'm looking forward to continuing to share the wealth with our emerging adults, but hopefully that we'll get them in when they're a little healthier when they come to us too. So,
anyone have a question for Joanne? No?
To what degree does alcohol consumption affect these health markers that you were talking about?
Did everyone hear that?
Okay, so the question is to what degree does alcohol consumption affect these health markers? Well, that's an interesting question, and before we do the measurements, we say they need to be off alcohol for 48 hours. Of course, that's not really, we really don't have any way of measuring whether that's true, and 48 hours of abstinence is not going to help much, but we do know that, and in this population, we do collect information. We do a lot of health screening information. We do know that alcohol consumption is extremely high. We keep hearing stories like, oh, it's not really true. They think that they drink more than they really do, but they think everybody drinks more, and that they should drink more because everybody does, but they really don't. But they really do. And, it's a big concern. It's a big concern. And if it's only for a short period of time, you can say, well, they'll grow up and they'll move out of this. But we also know that some of the markers that we look at, like changes in liver function, can actually be affected by alcohol, and some of those are not going to get better. So, alcoholism is a big issue. in the emerging adult population, and continues. So, yeah, it's a great question.
One more?
Are any of the classes you teach available to non-UNH students to take?
Not at this point, but we certainly are looking at ways of increasing our reach into the community. So we're looking at doing some non-credit type courses and weekend classes and doing more things online. So I think that there'll be more outreach into be available in the future. I'd love that. It's actually, I'd love to be dealing with fully immersed adults.